me just share my screen. Okay. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Yes, Partha, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going to talk about system design, and this is specifically in terms of how the interviews are conducted on if you say make it to the on-site round and you have to take say a series of interviews, then one of the interviews will definitely be a system design interview if you are having some experience under your belt. If you are a fresher, the design interview is more oriented towards object-oriented fashion. But if you have some experience, say at least 2 to 3 years of experience, then system design is a mandatory interview round. So it's one of the most challenging rounds, I guess, because for the algorithms and stuff, you practice a lot and on lead codes and other websites like that, and you kind of have some idea about how to approach the problem, what are the patterns they fall into, but you can be completely overthrown when a particular system design problem is presented to you, something you might have never heard or never thought of, right? So that's the challenge you would face if you go for a system design interview. So
I have a question actually.
sure.
So like if you have no experience doing the system design, means you have good experience in the industry, but you don't have any experience designing the system. So how will you, I had this one time interview and then they just asked about my experience, but I didn't have any experience on system design and they just didn't ask me any questions on it. Like they were expecting me, even though I have practiced a little bit on system design, but they were not keen on going forward on interview. So how will you tackle with those kind of situation?
So Ankita, this is Suva. Let me take that question first, and Partha, if you want to add anything. Okay. So yes, that is it is unfortunate that that happened, and if they had not specified that in the job description, it's sad, right? They should have mentioned that in the beginning, especially if they called you for the interview. Then they should have clarified that in the beginning. But that being said,
in the job description, but it's not just in my profile. Like I was not doing system design or anything like that. I was just doing basic engineering job, the fixing and coding and all those things. So I was
yes.
not doing any system design.
Understood. And very quickly, I'll answer your question in the interest of time, and let's move forward with the topic at hand today. And hopefully the session today will help you and others like you, right? There would be several people with very similar expectations. It'll help you at least get started, that should you encounter such questions in the future, how would you go about tackling it, right? So that being said, from what I've heard from most of the hiring managers, and I've been in that role myself many years ago, is that they usually, based on the number of years of experience, they tend to put you into certain buckets, right? So people with say 2 to 3 years of experience is one bucket, and then 3 to 6 years is another bucket, and people with 6 to 8 years or more years of experience is another bucket. And each bucket tends to get asked different kinds of questions. The initial bucket is people who have been there for just 2 to 3 years. The questions are fairly fundamental, and as long as you know the basics of data structures and algorithms and know any one programming languages, and you're fairly comfortable, that's good, because they are like, okay, we'll take these people and we'll train them, right? The second category is, yes, you have to be a little proficient and with maybe some knowledge of how you would go about designing a system. And maybe I'm just guessing here, they might have considered you with that kind of a profile in mind, so they might have asked you some basic questions. For the third category, for sure, if you're looking at 7, 8, 9 years of experience and more, they will immediately go into system design. Absolutely. And irrespective of whether or not it is called out explicitly in the job description, they will ask you a lot of prodding, detailed questions. And we have seen that through experience. So, and again, based on your profile and the kind of job you're targeting, you may want to be, prepared accordingly. But that being said, Ankita and the rest of the folks, we'll let Partha continue on today, because the article that he is sharing with all of us is actually something that, he has prepared. He's also an author. So, we'll go through that and we'll get a chance to have a sneak peek, right, at what something he's planning to publish in the very near future. So, Partha, back to you, all yours.
Sure. Yeah. So to add with what Subha already said, so even if you are say like a regular developer where you do not actually design or architect systems, you are expected to have some kind of knowledge about those systems, right? Like in my day-to-day job, I also don't architect systems. I probably work on certain parts of the systems and components as and when required, and then I have to move on to another component. So it's not that I am doing an end-to-end design for one particular system, because I am not yet in that role of an architect. But even as a software engineer, you are supposed to have some idea about the systems. You are supposed to know certain bits and pieces, how the different components can interact with each other and stuff like that. So in general, distributed systems design is a hard problem. There is no easy solution, and there is obviously no easy and straightforward answer. Also, no design is a good design or a bad design. So it's all about how you present yourself and how much thought you are applying to that particular problem, right? So basically, you might get stumped when you come across a problem. So you have to relax. You have to let your tension and all of that go out. You have to basically start thinking through the problem bit by bit, piece by piece. Try to define the scope of the problem. Because suppose if someone asks you to design YouTube, it does not mean that you have to design each and every feature of YouTube. You just focus on a subset of features. For example, in YouTube, you probably would want users to upload videos and stream videos. Those are the two main functionalities you can think about YouTube. So you design your system around that and clarify that with your interviewer, that what is the scope of the interview he or she has in mind, right? Then you have to identify who are the actors of your system, who are interacting with your system. You also have to understand that this particular system has to scale for maybe 10,000 users, maybe 100,000 users, or in future it can even scale to 1 million users. How will your system handle those many users, right? What will be your database look like? How will the load be handled on your front-end servers and back-end servers and stuff like that? So you have to just think about that. Similarly, don't immediately jump into the design, but you have to think every small component through and then slowly unravel your design. And whatever you are thinking, just try to think out loud, because interviewer doesn't know what is going on in your mind. And unless you talk, they will never know. So you have to. So today I am going to talk about DoorDash. It's a very popular app. Probably all of you have used it to order food. So this is my attempt to take a dive into how the design can go for such an app. So when you start with the interview, it will probably be a 45 to 1 hour interview. So initial 5-10 minutes, you have to basically identify the actors of the system, make some assumptions, state your assumptions to the interviewer, and then you have to dive deep into the functional requirements, like what exactly is your system supposed to do? What are the different use cases your system is supposed to handle? So in our case, we are going to assume a few things. We will not do inventory management for restaurants. So restaurants will supply unlimited food. Restaurants will also not have their online ordering system, which means that they solely depend on our system to accept order and deliver order, right? And then customers will not be shown any restaurant which is outside the 10-mile radius, right? So a customer in California cannot order food from a restaurant in New York, right? And then another thing we have to say is that customers are allowed to order food from just one restaurant. You cannot mix and match different restaurants. And I think that is one of the salient features of DoorDash as well. You cannot order for multiple restaurants in one order. It is just one restaurant and maybe multiple items in that one order. So those are the assumptions. And then the functional requirements is that customer should be able to search menu items, restaurants, or whatever. They should be able to order. And obviously before ordering, they have to add items to the order. They can cancel the order, track the status, pay for the order, obviously. And then before all of this ordering happens, they have to create their account, and if they want to update their contact information or address at some point, then they should be able to do that. So these are some of the functional requirements based on the customer, who is one significant actor in the system. Now coming to restaurants, because they are delivering food, they also have their own functional requirements. So their functional requirements would be, they should be able to create their profile, which means they upload information about the restaurant, about the menus they serve, pricing and all of that. They should be able to receive orders from the system saying that a particular customer has placed an order, right? They should also be able to, so suppose they go out of business, they should be able to offboard the portal, right? The third most important actor in the system is a DoorDasher, who actually picks up the order and delivers it to the customer. So in this case, the DoorDasher should be able to receive notifications about the order. They should know when the order is available for pickup. They should also be able to inform the customer or the restaurant if suppose there is a problem in delivering the order or picking it up or something like that. And if they don't want to provide any service anymore, they should be able to deregister. So these are known as functional requirements, what your system is supposed to do. And then there are a couple of non-functional requirements which also you should discuss initially. For example, what is the, like how available the service should be. Can we handle servers going down and customers not being able to order food? We should not be, right? It should be highly available. Similarly, suppose the restaurant is just creating their profile. They are uploading pictures of their menu items and all of that. Do you need immediate availability of that information for customers to order? Probably not, because restaurant just wants to make sure that everything is good before they are able to accept orders, right? So in that case, we do not need a full consistency, in the sense the data is not immediately available after the data is uploaded. And obviously there should be high throughput, because lots of customers will be ordering from lots of areas. So it should handle peak load. So these are kind of non-functional requirements of the system. And since you have also made assumptions, now you have to also clear out some out of scope requirements, that I am not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. You have to specifically tell those things. So in our case, in this particular discussion, we are not doing rating a restaurant, rating a DoorDasher, reporting capabilities, and then some ETA calculation. So ETA calculation is a very important functionality of DoorDash, right? So I am purposely leaving it out here, because ETA calculation itself is another system design. So if I include that here, probably this discussion can go for 4 hours. So ETA calculation is something I'm leaving out. Similarly, supply, demand, logistics, decision making, all of that, right? And then mapping capabilities, which means that you will not be able to see the location of the DoorDasher on the map, which DoorDash actually provides you. They show you the location of the DoorDasher on the map. So we are leaving that functionality out here, right? So immediately after your functional requirements and everything, you have to basically talk about the scale a bit, where you estimate how much load your system has to, has to handle, right? How many users, how many orders can come, how many stores are we talking about, right? How many restaurants are we talking about? So you can do a little bit of calculation here, and you can show your interviewer that you are knowledgeable about the numbers. You want to take informed decisions about your system or your architecture based on the amount of load that is incumbent into the system, right? So this is something you have to discuss as well. So I am discussing here, I am basically assuming that there could be 20 million customers to start with when the system is launched. And if each customer places 2 orders every day, which means that customers never cook themselves, they are always ordering on DoorDash, then we get 40 million orders a day. And there could be peak times based on the location. For example, peak time in California will be around 12 p.m. our local time. Peak time in New York might be 12 p.m. their local time, which is 3 hours ahead of us, right? So basically discuss all of that. After that, you come to the data model. So you basically list out the
Before you
entities.
come to the data model, Partha, and this is a great introduction, and sorry for the interruption there. I know some people have just joined us now. So we are looking at a system design example, and the example that Partha, who's a senior developer at Apple, is sharing with us today is DoorDash. DoorDash is the pretty popular app that people use to order food, right? Using their mobile devices generally. So there are a few very important things that Partha has mentioned so far, and I want everybody to remember this, right? When you are going for an interview now, go with the assumption that potentially, if it is like the final interview or close to, there is a high likelihood that you will be asked some kind of a system design question, okay, without a doubt. So you have to be prepared for that. That's learning number one. Learning number two is these kind of questions you cannot answer on the fly if you are not really well prepared. You have to be well prepared. Now you might ask, DoorDash is a food delivery example. Okay, I get it. But what if they ask me about something totally different, like Uber, for example, right? And these are fairly standardized system design questions, asking you to design Uber, asking you to design Gmail, asking you to design, here he's taken DoorDash example. So the point is not necessarily about the example. It would help if you have practiced at least 5 or 6 fairly standard system design problems. That will definitely give you an edge, number one. But number two, more important than that, is the framework. And what Partha has discussed so far is that approach of the framework. And the first thing that he talked about was ensure that you ask the right questions to the manager or whoever is interviewing you. Okay, what is it that you actually want? What are the functional requirements of such a system at a very high level? Now, if I'm a hiring manager and the minute you start asking me these questions before answering, immediately I'll be impressed. That should be your approach. The more difficult the question, the more detailed your questioning should be. So give me some functional requirements of the system. Give me some of the non-functional assumptions of the system. And then once the hiring manager tells you that, okay, this is at a bare minimum what the system should do or should not do, whatever, you make a note of that. Okay, you make a note of that and then say, based on this, I think these are the assumptions I want to start off with. List out your assumptions, okay, and list out whatever is in the scope of your design, whatever is outside the scope of your design. After that, you have to design or mention who you think are the actors in the system, right? The person placing the order, the restaurant that takes the order, the person who actually picks up the food and drives it to you. So there are multiple actors who are playing different roles as part of this, in this supply chain or this flow of the application. So ask those questions. And also, Partha talked about capacity. At the end of the day, you have to fulfill the order. There is going to be volume. So irrespective of the problem, your assumptions, your actors, your in scope, your out of scope things, your capacity planning, your system planning, and now he's going to talk about data design. All these things are going to be there in that framework. So please, guys, keep that in mind. As Partha is discussing this, take a piece of paper and start writing these framework points, right? Because whatever system you're going to design should have these components. And you should keep asking questions and validating your approach with the interviewing manager. And remember, you have to do this within 45 minutes to 1 hour. And this is usually on site. So it's not an easy job. So the more prepared you are, the better it will be. Partha, back to you.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so, this kind of, the system design interviews are very conversational. You have to continuously talk about things. You have to clarify your doubts. You have to ask questions, and then you have to basically speak into the mind of the interviewer, what exactly he or she is trying to make you design, right? But don't go by some basic assumptions like, okay, if the interviewer has asked me this question, then probably I should design it that way. There could be a lot of different data that can come out when you ask questions. So having said that, so the next thing you have to actually think about is you have to think about the data model, which means that you want to list out the entities. So I'm not sure whether people already know about entity relationship, but it is how you model your system, right? So every particular object in your system is an entity, and it will have some attributes, and there will be relations between those entities, and that is expressed in terms of database design in the form of an entity relationship diagram. So you are not supposed to actually draw an ER diagram out there. No one is asking you to do that. This is just for demonstration purpose that I have put in here. This is not required, but what is required is you understand the data model, or you at least try to figure out what the data model will look like, so that if you have a high level overview of the entity and the various relationships, you can build your system architecture around those entities, right? So we are not asking you to create an ER diagram, but at least list out the possible entities that come to your mind directly. So when you think about ordering food, order is an entity, right? Then there is payment, and then there is a person who is ordering it. There is a person who is delivering it, and that could be the same person, or it could be a different person. A DoorDasher is also a person, a customer is also a person, right? So it can be a relationship like that. Then what can an order contain? It can contain an order item, right? Similarly, when a business is listing out their menus, what do they list out there, right? What are the various menu items? Say the business says that, okay, we have a breakfast menu, we have a lunch and dinner, and then we have an evening snack menu as well, right? So in that case, what is your menu item? What are the different components of the menu items that are placed in that particular breakfast menu, right? And then what are the options that are available? Say you want extra cheese, you want some other kind of flavoring, some ranch sauce or something like that. So those can be dealt under menu item option. So this is a very small amount of, I mean, I would say that this is not even covering everything that the data model should look like, but it is just a snapshot of certain important entities that are required for designing the system, right? Any questions so far? Okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, so once you are done with the data model, then you actually talk about the data storage, which means that you talk about what kind of databases are you looking to use for your system, right? So it could be, I mean, it's very well if you want to just do a relational database, right? Because a lot of us come from that relational database background. I was in Oracle for several years, and I come from a very relational database mind frame, right? So every system design problem, I try to figure out whether I can put a relational database in place. But always putting a relational database might not be the best solution, because we have to think about scalability, right? We have to think about data partitioning, and all of those different things I'm going to come later. But when you think about scalability, relational databases pose some kind of problem. And that is primarily because of the amount of data you want to store. So if you have a 1 billion data related to customers or orders and stuff like that, it might not be a very good idea to store data in a relational database where we are storing, say, restaurant data, menu data, and all of that, because you don't know the number of restaurants that is going to come up. And then as and when there are functionalities that are very highly required, it might grow slow to actually access a relational database and retrieve the data. So in this particular example, I have suggested that we can do for the restaurant menu description and user data and dasher data, we can use a NoSQL database. Cassandra is one example. It is a columnar database. It has its own prospects and constraints, which I have not discussed here. And since the menu also contains pictures of different items, right? So those pictures can be stored in some kind of storage service. Ideally, it's a good idea to not store the pictures in a relational database or any kind of database for that matter. It is a good idea to store it in an object storage. Amazon S3 provides one. There are other HDFS and Big bucket, I think Big Bucket or something is there. So there are a lot of actually object storage services available. So Amazon S3 is one of them. For transactional processes like ordering, it is always good to have an Oracle database because we want to maintain the transaction. And relational databases are the best for transactions. Non-relational databases or NoSQL databases are not good for transactions, right? So they don't provide the ACID, which is atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability requirements. Some of the terms might be new to you. I apologize for that, but I mean, these are certain things which you should be knowing when you go into an interview, and you could be even asked questions on top of that, right? Sometimes there might be a database expert sitting right in front of you, and in the entire system design, out of 45 minutes, you might be answering questions related to just the database for 30 minutes. It has happened to me. So although the question is about system design, since the person who is interviewing is a database expert, he or she is more interested in seeing whether you are good at database designing. So it sometimes varies as per the interviewer as well. But overall, the 90% of the interviews are about the overall system design, not just the database part. Okay, so now is the main part where you actually discuss what kind of system you're going to design. So once you have laid out the plans for database, data model and all, then you actually have to draw out certain parts of the system, right? So in our particular case, the search is the most important feature because a customer will go into the app and try to search for a certain menu. Today I want to have pasta, then I'll go and search for it. Or I'll search for an Italian restaurant and stuff like that. So search is basically the entry point for all the customers, most of the customers, right? So we have to build a system where search becomes very fast. So in order to do that, there are certain technologies available in the market. Elasticsearch is one. Apache Solr is another search technology that is available in the market. And we can actually design a search system based on that. So I'll directly go into the search ecosystem. So what I'm suggesting here is that we have a couple of services. One is the restaurant profile service, which the restaurant owner uses to upload data into the system. So once they upload certain data related to their store, their offering, that data goes into the database. The images go into the object storage. But we are also having a queue where there is a notification going in saying that something has changed in the system. And then I'm proposing that there should be a data indexer which listens to that particular notification. And then it talks with the database, tries to retrieve some data and pushes it into the search cluster, which could be an Elasticsearch or Apache Solr. So when I'm talking about Elasticsearch, it is basically a search technology, which is based on inverted index, which means basically almost similar to how Google works. So it's a different data storage, but it is not the primary data storage. It is only meant for searching so that we don't have to hit the database and we can retrieve results at least almost like 50 to 80, 90% faster than what we can do when we hit the database with that search query, right? So that's where the search cluster or the search technology comes into picture. The search service that I'm proposing here talks with the search cluster and it executes the query, which is again a search query, and it represents the data to the mobile or the web customer client. The customer client then renders the data in the format that is specified and shows it to the user. So this is our whole search ecosystem. But then this is not the only thing, right? After searching, the next important thing comes up is ordering. You have to order the food, right? So search is one part, probably the starting part of the system, but the next part is ordering. So for ordering, I'll have an ordering service. Then I am also proposing another service called order fulfillment service. So you might have a question saying that why are we having so many services, right? So the point is we are planning to do a less coupled interaction between different services. Each of the services can be scaled individually as per requirement. Today, for example, the restaurant service, profile service might be used once in a while. Like after the restaurant uploads the data to regarding their menus, they might not change it much. So the number of instances of that service might not be a lot. But ordering service, millions of customers will be ordering. So ordering service might need a lot more instances to run. So differentiating the business based on certain functions is what is required so that we can achieve the scalability and the peak load and the availability and other stuff, right? So that's the reason I proposed microservice based architecture here. And also I proposed a publisher subscriber pattern, which means that these microservices interact with each other, not directly, but using a queue, right? So why I want to do that? Because in that case, the microservices individually don't know about each other. Someone will post a message, someone else might read that message, but microservice A posting a message does not know that microservice B is going to consume that message. And the message format will be standardized. So it's kind of a publish subscribe pattern. Also, microservices go with the database per service paradigm, which means that every microservice should own a part of the database or at least a couple of tables, and no other microservice should be able to access those tables. So it's one service per set of tables. And this is again required because we want to do functional partitioning. We want to basically functionally partition the entire system. Ordering is one, searching is another, then order fulfillment is another, right? Then DoorDasher management is another service. So that each of those are different functions in the system. And this is when you go deep into the architecture, right? You figure out that these are the different moving parts in the system which you can functionally partition. Now, the thing is, you probably will not be able to figure out all of this in an interview, which is 45 minutes under stressful conditions. But if you at least try to figure out the high level functions that you are trying to establish here, right? Like the search and the ordering, and then you drill down a bit more into ordering, then you might be able to discuss more on this, right? So in this particular case, there is something called a geo distance query, which is a part of the Elasticsearch or Apache Solr. So what it helps is, suppose the user wants to search for certain restaurants, then it will respond within a particular radius. So it will basically look at the location of the user and only respond with restaurants that are within that particular radius, right? So so that's all. Like, we are trying to functionally partition all of this. Service is one, order fulfillment service is another one, then user profile management for basically customers to create their user profile, for DoorDashers to create their profile and all of that. And then DoorDasher dispatch is basically how the DoorDasher handles the order, right? How to send out notifications to DoorDashers, how to make sure that the DoorDashers are assigned to an order and stuff like that can be handled through this particular service. Similarly, we have restaurant profile service, which the restaurant owners can use to onboard, update, delete their profile, create, upload images and stuff like that. Since ordering is involved, we also need an external payment service, which will talk to, say, American Express, Citibank, or whosever card you are using. It can also talk to PayPal, Apple Pay, or Amazon Payments, or any other such payment gateways, right? And then another important service is the notification service, which will basically notify all the actors of the system. So let me show you the interaction. Like this is the overall, let me reduce this size a bit. So this is the overall design of the system. So as you can see, there is this ordering, all the services are laid out and each service has their own database. Also, you can see the mobile clients laid out, and then there are those actors, that smiley faces right there. There is the queue which we are using for the publish subscribe scheme, right? And then you can basically draw this component. It does not need to be very beautiful, but at least if you can show that different parts of the system, how they're interacting, how a particular function is being executed, that is absolutely required for an interview. You have to show the component design because ultimately you have to show the architecture of the design you are coming up with, right? So this component diagram is very necessary. You have to come up with this because unless you do, things don't fall into place because you don't, you'll probably not be able to show what you are trying to design, right? Unless you draw this diagram. So I'm going to show the workflow which I have created. Let me see. Are you able to see this PPT PowerPoint?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. So let me do the slideshow. Okay. So the workflow is basically the customer placing the order, and before placing the order, they are searching for restaurants and stuff like that. And then they are adding items to the cart and all of that. And then they're placing the order, right? So once the order is placed, the next thing is the ordering service will post a message to the queue saying that order has been placed. Now, ordering service does not bother who is going to listen to that message. The only functionality it has is it will have to post a message to the queue saying that order was placed. So what happens next? The next thing is the notification service reads that order. It reads that message, right? And then what it does is it will notify the restaurant saying that there is an order placed, please accept it. Next, what happens is the restaurant accepts the order. And how does the restaurant accept the order? It talks with the restaurant client, web client or mobile client, whatever they're using. It talks with the order fulfillment service and it informs that we are accepting the order. So the order fulfillment service, what it does is it will post a message to the queue saying that order has been accepted, right? The next thing that happens is two of the consumers, or the subscribers, I would say, are listening to that message which was posted by order fulfillment service. So message 3 was posted by order fulfillment service. Now message 3 is read by two subscribers. One is the DoorDasher dispatch, another is the notification service. So let's talk about notification service here. It basically reads that message and informs the customer that your order has been accepted by the restaurant. So that's it. It has done its part. The DoorDasher service, dispatch service, what it does is it will read that order. It will then post a message saying that these are the available DoorDashers in the area, right? So post this message to the available DoorDashers saying that this order is pending acceptance. Like some DoorDasher has to come and say that, okay, I am ready to pick up that order, right? Or I am ready to accept that order and deliver that order. So the dispatch service actually does that. It will post a message like that. Then next, what happens is notification service will read that order, read that message, and then it will notify the DoorDashers in the area that, okay, these are the orders that are available. If you accept whichever you want to. Right? So next, what happens is the DoorDasher accepts the order, and it accepts the order. The DoorDasher accepts the order using the client, which talks to DoorDasher dispatch service, and then the dispatch service posts a message to the queue saying that the DoorDasher has been assigned to this order, right? So the next thing that happens is notification service reads that message and it tells the restaurant as well as the customer that DoorDasher has been assigned to the order. The next thing that happens is when the food is ready for pickup, then the restaurant is going to say that change the status of the order, right? Using the order fulfillment service. So once that is done, the order fulfillment service will post a message to the queue saying that food is ready to be picked up. So the next thing that happens is notification service reads that message and it sends notifications to the dasher as well as the customer saying that food is ready for picking up, right? So after that, dasher visits the restaurant, picks up the food, restaurant updates the status of the order saying that food has been picked up. And once that is done, the order fulfillment service actually posts a message saying the order has been picked up. Again, the notification service reads that message and notifies the customer that order is picked up on the way to delivery, right? The next thing is the dasher delivers the food. Customer becomes very happy because he or she was very hungry. The next thing is dasher updates the order delivery using the DoorDasher dispatch service saying that I have delivered the order. The DoorDasher dispatch service says that order was delivered. It posts a message to the queue. And at that time, two consumers again read that message, the same message, saying that order delivered. So the notification service basically reads the message and then it notifies the restaurant as well as the customer that the order was delivered. And the order fulfillment service reads that message saying that the status of the order has been updated to delivered. And that's the end of the flow, right? So you can basically talk about the flow. You can draw the components a bit and then you can talk about the flow because this is required. And this also shows that you understand the problem. And then after that, you can come up with some system APIs if required, or if it is not required, that is also fine. Sometimes some interviewers might ask you to discuss about the system APIs, like what kind of APIs the customer will be, or the actors or the different services will be providing, right? So it's always a good idea to come up with some of the system APIs. And then the next topic is data partitioning. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that as your data will grow, it is going to be very difficult to keep the data into one database, one instance, because every instance has their own limitations and you do not want an instance to grow beyond 80% of its size, right? So that's the reason you should partition your data. And the way you partition your data is based on whatever scheme you choose. So for example, let's consider a user database. You could partition the user database based on the first name. Say whatever letter the first name starts with, say A to D will stay in one particular partition. Then E, F, G will stay in another partition. So that way you are basically not storing everything in one instance. You are storing it in different instances. Obviously, you will also need to have a strategy to look up, and hashing is one such strategy where you specify which particular shard or which particular partition your data resides in. And when you talk about scalability, it will always be required that your data will grow and then you might have to increase the number of instances of your database. So sometimes you have to increase it and then your hashing mechanism will change. You might have to repartition or rehash everything. So one particular way of dealing with that is consistent hashing. I do not want to discuss much on it, but that is one thing which is very important to know. Sometimes it is very much required that to come up with this hash reassigning hash problem, we can use the consistent hashing fundamental to explain that. So the fault tolerance and replication part, these are certain things you can talk about if you have time. So you can say that you want multiple copies of the service running. You want multiple copies of the database there. Say you want to have one master and say two slaves, that kind of replication strategy. The master replicates to slaves and the data is read from the slave and the master writes the data and stuff like that. You can discuss all of that. fault tolerance is, suppose there are 5 instances of a service running, one service goes down, are the other 4 able to withstand the traffic that is coming in at that particular point of time? Also, if you go for an auto scaling strategy, the instances of the service should pin up automatically to suffice the workload at that particular time, right? So those are the strategies you can discuss in your interview. Caching. So caching is one very important piece of the architecture. You can do caching at multiple levels. In this particular design, we can use a caching for search queries and various hot menu items or hot restaurants in an area. There are several technologies that are available in the market which can be used for caching. For example, Redis, Hazelcast, Memcached, all of these are different technologies. Each has its own benefits and downsides. So we have to choose carefully what we want to use. Also, whenever we talk about cache, we also should talk about the strategy of evicting certain entries from the cache, right? So based on our use case, we can decide what kind of strategy we should do, whether it can be a least recently used strategy, it could be a least frequently used, or it could be a most frequently used or most recently used, right? So for example, if you are, suppose you want to design an app, a dating app like Tinder, right? So in that case, the most frequently or the most recently used strategy will be useful, because suppose a user has swiped on one profile left or right, the app should not propose the same profile to the user again. So the most recently viewed profile should be immediately evicted from the cache, right? So it depends on the use case, what you are trying to establish or what you are trying to accomplish. So it depends on that, and your the eviction policy will be around that, right? Then there is another concept called content delivery network. So for various applications like Netflix, YouTube, the content is delivered from a particular server which is close to the user and not really the server where the data is stored. What this does is it will basically decrease the latency of content being delivered to the user. So in our case, if we use a content delivery network, then the various images and menu items and other things can be delivered very fast, very near to the user if that is the requirement, right? So it is not really a requirement in this particular case because we are looking at only delivery radius of 10 miles. So content delivery network is not required. But if you're talking about Netflix, YouTube design or stuff like that, then content delivery network becomes very important. Some interviewers might be interested in knowing about security, about how you handle security in your applications, how you should secure the line, what are the different security protocols you use. So OAuth 2 is very useful and very popular. Similarly, all the different services will interact with each other or with the queue on an SSL line or a TLS. So it's called TLS now. So those are the things you should discuss if required. The load balancing part is basically every instance, like there are suppose 10 instances of service running. So you have to distribute the load, right? You cannot put all the requests to one particular instance. So load balancers are basically those components in the system which help in handling the load and distribute it as per certain algorithms. There are a lot of algorithms that are there which decides what particular strategy we take for balancing the load. Some of them are least connection time, round robin fashion and stuff like that. So you can discuss a bit about load balancing, but it is a kind of a given that if you have multiple instances of the service, there will be a load balancer in front of those services, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's how you basically attack a system design problem, and you kind of try to nail it. Sometimes you are able to nail it, sometimes you are not, but then the best thing you can do is practice with a friend, find a buddy, practice with that friend, try to whiteboard the design, right? Try to design, try to draw those pictures, try to get that idea onto the board, try to figure out what are the bottlenecks of your design, what are the points of failure, right? If a particular database goes down, is that a point of failure? What should you do to mitigate that point of failure? What should you do in case, right, there is a huge peak load, right? So those are the various discussions your interviewer might ask you, right? What are the points of failure? And you discuss that, okay, I will have a replication strategy in place. I will have one replica for each of the database instances, so that if one instance goes down, the replica instance basically serves the data from that. Similarly, for services, there will be multiple instances running. So if one instance goes down, there will be other instances which will be able to handle that load. So basically, you have to talk about all of that. Finally, there is a resource called Educative, which is very useful. And I personally used it for my own interview preparations for several companies. It has a lot of system design questions. Maybe I'm not trying to sell Educative, but I found it very useful. So you guys can also probably take a look at it and see if those courses can help you. That's pretty much it. Probably I will be open to questions, if any.
This was a great session, Partha. So folks, please unmute yourself. I think Ankita probably has a question. So Ankita, go ahead, and likewise others as well. By default, we have muted your lines, so you'll have to unmute yourself before asking your question. Ankita, go ahead.
Okay, so firstly, could you please share this link in a chat channel?
Yeah, Ankita, I will do that. I'm actually not yet done making some changes to this article. So I have not published it yet.
Oh.
Probably in the next 1 week or so, I'm going to publish it, and then I can share it with you guys. I mean, I'll share it with Suva, and he probably can distribute it across.
Yes, yes. So if you are on our distribution list, Ankita and others, for those of you who are not, we just got a one-time invite. Please let me know if you would like to, once Partha publishes this article on Medium, if you'd like to see it, number one. Number two, he also mentioned about educative.io. And along with that, we still have another 15 minutes minimum of this session, because I'll be sharing some resources with all of you, given that we have quite a number of people on the call right now. So we will talk about that as well. So yes, we will share this. Ankita, any other questions?
No, I'm good. But Educative is a good resource. I tried it also.
Yeah, hi, Partha. I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I understand the whole system design for the backend and all those things. I'm a front-end engineer, right? A lot of times
Yes.
It's very confusing. What should I expect in a front-end system design question? And sometimes it's very confusing because the interviewer may not be a front-end guy. So can you give me some pointers? What should I expect?
I think from a front-end design perspective, you can expect that. So I had a experience once when I was interviewing for a full stack position. So as you know me personally, so you know that I'm primarily a backend engineer, right? So for me, that interview was kind of an eye opener as to what to expect in a front end or in a full stack kind of system, right? So there, the pattern of the question and the problem use case given to me was kind of different. Since it was a full stack position, they were expecting me to come up with something on the front end as well as the back end, right? So the entire discussion was about 1 hour. And then in that 1 hour, the interviewer made it very clear that he wants me to think through the front end design as well as the back end design. So what that means is I had to figure out how my screen or the UI will look like. Okay. So suppose I was given an example, like you design a gaming website or a gaming mobile application. And I was given a choice, like you can design everything, anything you want. So I took up like, okay, I will design Cricinfo because I'm familiar with cricket and I know how things are. So I will design Cricinfo, right? So then the question was about, these are the requirements of the system. So when I went through and I asked that, what are your requirements? What do you want this particular system to accomplish, right? The functional requirements. Then it said, he said that I need to show what are the teams that are doing best in this particular season. What are the stats of the player? Who is the best player from each of the teams that are playing in the season? And things like that. He kept on like adding 5 or 6 different requirements. So based on that requirement, you have to design how your UI or the mobile app will look like. So I actually kind of designed saying that, okay, these are the boxes I think my system should have. This particular box will show the stats of the team that is performing the best at the moment. And then he was asking me what exactly are you going to show in that particular box, right? So at that point of time, I was telling him that, okay, these are the particular stats I'm going to show. Then from that, he asked me, what do you think would be the API call for this, showing this particular part? Now let's go into the backend slowly, right? So once I was done with the front end part where I was putting those tiles in place and each tile specifying what exactly I want to show there and how the data will come was a different question at that point of time. It was about what you are designing there, right? What particular UI you are trying to come up with so that the functional requirements laid out by the interviewer are met. Now, the next question was, how do you translate this particular data you are showing on the UI to backend system calls, right? So in that case, he was not asking me to design all of the things, right? He was asking me to design some service or a couple of services which will basically cater to that data. So then he was saying that, okay, let's go to the data model, right? How will you design this system? How will you come up with the entity relationship model for this particular system, right? What are the actors of your system? What are the different entities you see in the system? Now, then when you went to the data, then again, we came back to that point where what are the various functional services you are going to design and what will be the APIs of those services. And then the last question was, how do you tie back the UI, the services and the data model? How will you answer this particular question and stuff like that? So that was the approach taken by the interviewer to go across the different things. And as you can see, there was a significant amount of questions on the front end design as well, like how the UI should look like, what are the facilities that should be. He did not go technical about how to implement that UI, but at least the design of the UI, how should different particular items be placed on the screen, where from that data will come, what will be the call you make to get that data, right? Will you do any kind of caching? For example, in this case, since the the best performing team, so every user who logs into the system should see that, right? So that data you don't need to take, and you don't need to call the database all the time to get that data, right? Since that team is the most best performing right now, you can keep that data in a cache and you can retrieve the data from the cache and show it in the UI, right? So basically those questions are around that.
I see.
Partha, just to add to what Emmanuel was asking. So it really depends on the interviewer and the kind of role you're applying for. But in general, right, whether you're a front end or back end developer, the interviewers want to know that how you will work together, right? If you're a front end developer, you will have to work with back end engineer as well. Right? You will need to basically call some APIs. You will need to understand the format, the response, right? So they want to basically understand how you would be working with your counterpart, whether if you're front end or back end. So that's really the main aspect they try to really judge.
Right.
So it's not so much about that you need to know everything about the other aspects.
Right. And I agree with that, Sunita, because one of the things that the interviewer is trying to find out is, will I be able to work with this person? Is this person headstrong and is this person open to suggestions, or he's just thinking whatever he's thinking and just putting forward without listening to me. So it also gives a sneak peek into the perspective or thought process of the person, and even the characteristic flair of that person as a team member.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. Thanks, Partha.
Sure. Any more questions?
So as people are thinking about their questions, let me ask a question now, given that I see Sunita on the call as well. So maybe Sunita, from your perspective, right, having hired people with front-end, back-end skills and looking through the framework that Partha has used in this current, DoorDash problem, what are the components that you think in an interview a candidate must have versus what do you think are more of the superficial items which, given you're given a problem and now this is an interview, in most cases you're at a client site, 2-3 people in front of you, to be able to whiteboard all of this, think through this and answer it, precisely, concisely, whatever within that time frame is difficult, right? And Partha talked about so many components. So from your perspective, what are the basic things that people need to ensure that as long as they have those things grounded, they have a good starter? So please share from your perspective on all aspects of the framework.
Yeah, sure. So of course, Partha has covered everything that should be part of system design, right? But basically, I would say the key part to this is really the overall architecture. Basically, what interviewers are looking for is that you understand the system, right? What are the different microservices? Maybe there are, how, like here, Partha has talked about order fulfillment service, notification service. So in general, just breakdown of the system, of the problem that they're trying for you to solve. It doesn't mean that you have to have the whole data model, caching, load balancer, everything. But basically, when somebody asks you a question, you kind of think about how that system should behave, from a user perspective. Now, let's say you sort of have some services and some interaction you are showing with the different personas. So like personas in this case, like customer, DoorDasher, restaurant guys, right? And then when you have that sort of a system breakdown picture on whiteboard, then you kind of also want to ask, okay, what are the functional requirements that you would want the system to behave? So you kind of ask the interviewer, and they will tell you, hey, okay, now there are some security concerns. Maybe if there is a security domain interest from that interviewer, they might ask that question. So it really depends on the kind of interview, the position that you are going for. But I would say having a little bit of knowledge about different areas is good, just so they know that you will think about these things. Okay, disaster recovery, load balancing, partitioning, but it doesn't mean you have to be expert at everything. But so it's really about for you to really show them that you understand the system. You can sort of put high-level picture together, and I'm sure you can. It's just a matter of practicing some of these problems, because once you kind of solve some of these problems, you will know, like you solve 5 problems, 6th one you will know that, okay, I have to think about these things. Like Partha talked about relational database versus NoSQL. So these are like same things that you will have to think about whatever system you're designing for. So no, you don't have to be expert in everything. It really depends on the job that you're going for, but just have a high level understanding of different pieces. That's really what's going to help you. Hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, Sunita. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Sure.
Any more questions, folks? I see a lot of people on the call right now. So please, guys, please ask your questions. I guess folks are still thinking. So let me ask you another question then, Partha. If you could scroll to where you had those services called out, as Sunita was mentioning, right? I really liked that part of your presentation too.
This part?
Yes, yes. And I think you showed us a few slides, but I think this is a good starter. And just reiterating Sunita's point, and the purpose from asking the question is basically, as Sunita was mentioning as well, right? The interviewer, the hiring manager, and the team that actually interviews you, because at the end of the day, you'll be part of that team, right? They're looking at what kind of a team player are you? How are you going to collaborate once, So they are not necessarily looking for just a whiz kid. They're looking for a good fit. Okay, and they know that you are as human as them, and you have your strengths and you have your areas of which you need to work on and all that stuff. So don't worry about not knowing things, as long as you're frank, saying, oh, I know about this, but I don't know much about that, but here is how much I know. I think that's the right approach to take. So when you're breaking down a problem like this, what kind of services? So then they will automatically know, oh, okay, this guy knows about software, service-oriented architecture. He or she has already broken down the problem into these bits. So the minute you start talking, service lingo, microservice lingo, and APIs, and this and that, they know, okay, irrespective of whether you are going for a front-end position or a back-end position, at least your verbiage alone in the first, in fact, I'll be sharing a slide with you, that a majority of the hiring managers make a decision, or most of their decision, within the first few minutes of your starting to speak. Okay, and we have all been, and many of us on this call right now have been in that role, as I was asking Sunita as well, and when I've hired myself, the way you answer the first question I ask you is going to determine 90% of the time whether or not the candidate is good. And that is going to be determined by, your background, how much of work you have done so far, and of course, how well prepared you are for the interview. Okay, so please don't take the interview preparation part lightly. Just because you've been working, say, as a software developer in a relatively high-profile company, even for many years, there might be many things that you might have lost track of, right, or lost touch of, including certain elements of data structures which you no longer use, because how in a corporate world, the coding thing is very different, right? Once you join a team, very seldom you write a program from scratch. It's all you pull stuff from here and there, and you're sort of quote unquote managing code and not quite developing code in most cases. So there's a tendency to lose some of the fundamental knowledge. So it always helps to sort of brush up on those, including algorithmic approaches and things of that sort. So I will take about 10 to 15 minutes in the end, again, just to sort of reiterate those points and share with you more resources that you might find online and will be helpful for your upcoming interviews. But I'll pause here for more questions.
So what are the famous design questions like we can think of to prepare to just start?
So Ankita, that is a great question. In fact, let me give you some homework, okay? I will be sharing with you very soon a resource that gives you access to 189 design questions. 189. So that should be enough, okay? So you'll have access to that. And out of the 189, of course, there are some basic 5 or 6, the fairly popular ones. There is a great resource created by a lady who used to work at Google, and then she sort of moved across multiple companies, and she was a hiring manager as well in a couple of those. And she started off as an intern at Google, and then she moved on, and over a decade, she tried different roles at different places. And I'll come to that. So I'll answer your question, but in a slightly indirect way, including that homework. And not only that, I'll also be sharing with you some YouTube resources. Okay, so just hold on to that. Yes, there are a few fairly standard problems, but I'm reminded of this. I think Partha mentioned this in one of his interviews. The hiring manager asked him to describe a system of his choice. That is the best question. I remember when I was in elementary school, I used to hate drawing, okay, art. And I always prepared one thing from my side. I used to memorize that drawing completely. And I knew in the question paper, there will be a bunch of things, but the last option will be or anything else of your choice. Okay. So if you are going for any software developer, front end, back end, whatever kind of interview, if you are not going there with preparing at least one or two systems, that you are fairly comfortable with end to end, then I think you are not ready. So you should do that. You should do all the homework, right? In terms of all the 6-7 aspects that Partha covered today. At least for 2 use cases, you should be good. Like an app, a user app like this, and maybe one for a Google kind of a system, like a Gmail kind of a system. If you had to redesign Gmail from scratch, how would you do it, and what would that system look like? So you should have at least these kind of problems done and up your sleeve, right? If they ask for it, nothing like it. And as a hiring manager, it also shows to me that, hey, you have done your homework and you're really prepared. And that would also, impress the hiring person. So Ankita, we'll come to your question in a couple of minutes. Any more questions? So Partha, before we wind up, any closing thoughts from your end?
Closing thoughts, yeah. So basically, I would go back to what I discussed earlier, which is these things, right? So basically, you are supposed to ask a lot of significant questions that describe the system or brings out certain data points about the system, right? So those are very, very important, because if you don't start asking questions and you have a fixed mindset when you are designing the system, then the interviewer will not actually force you to ask questions, but at certain point, they may pose some questions which will throw your complete design out of the window. Maybe you have wasted time designing a system that the interviewer did not even want you to design, right? So it's always good to scope your design discussions, ask a lot of questions, identify the scope very clearly, and state out assumptions, talk about requirements upfront, talk about the growth, and obviously you have to, while doing all of this, don't get excited, don't panic. Basically, sometimes it is quite possible that you are given a system which is something you have designed previously. So when you are encountering a problem like that, it is quite obvious, it is human nature that you are very excited. You basically want to show a lot of things, that okay, I have done this, I have done that, but in the process, your thought process might not come out as good and crisp as you want it to, right? So that's where you have to take a step back. You have to relax, slowly, construct your thoughts, and then flush out the details. And sometimes you might even come across situations where you have designed a system, but then the point the interviewer is trying to make is you do not design that whatever you have designed earlier. You have to design entirely something new, and some new feature which you have probably never thought of, right? So that's where your composure, your mental acumen comes into picture, how you are going to sustain yourself through the interview, talk through your logical thinking perspective. So basically, it's always good to have a clear mind and start thinking, rather than having a preconceived notion about a particular design question. You have to ensure that you have never designed something that way. You can obviously use your previous design knowledge, but do not assume anything. Just ask the interviewer straightforward, and then go ahead with it.
Yeah, I can attest to Partha's last point. There's Amanul here. I have done that. I've been in that situation where I got too excited and I lost complete sight of what was actually asked.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And for those of you who joined our So Partha, you can you pass me the host privileges? Just click on my name and just make me the host. For some reason, it's not letting me reclaim the host privileges.
Okay, have I done it?
Yes, I
Yes.
think you have. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Partha. And as Amanul was mentioning as well, right? I was about to say the same thing. Absolutely. In fact, for those of you who were on our boot camp last week, I had given a puzzle, right? Which was a fairly simple coding exercise. Well, I shouldn't say it was simple. It sounded simple, right? So given a number, you had to come down to 1. And you had 3 operations: divide by 3, divide by 2, and subtract 1. And you had to tell me what is the fastest way you get to 1. What are the number of steps? So in our next boot camp, which will not be this Thursday, but the following week, we can maybe touch upon where we left off. And then maybe those of you who have tried that exercise can share it with me. For those of you who are joining for the first time and would like to start joining us starting next week, please let me know if you would like to, take part in that exercise as well. So, we have a few quizzes every single time. Again, this is a way to help you prepare for those interviews. So let me start sharing my screen again and touch upon a few things.
Hey, Shubha, sorry to interrupt. So I just wanted to say that once I am done publishing, I would request you to go, you all to go through the article, and if you have any suggestions or anything or any questions, just let me know so that I'm able to address those. It will be good if I can get some feedback.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, Partha. And on behalf of BayOne and my level up team, and also all the people on the call today, we sincerely thank you and thanks Sunita for your time today. So thank you, Partha, from all of us, and a big round of applause to you.
Thank you, Partha.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you have a few more minutes, please do stay on, and I'll just reiterate, right? So for those of you on the call right now, there were multiple things, if you remember what Partha shared, right? When he was talking about databases, he was talking about the ACID, requirements for relational type of stores, including atomicity and, whatever different properties of a relational database element you want to consider. He was also mentioning about publisher subscriber kind of pattern, what we call pub sub. So the point here is, if you are not aware, if you are a software developer or you aspire to be one, and if you are focused in one area, and some of these terms like ACID and atomicity and locking and whatever database lingo is there, if this is new to you, spend some time, read through it. Okay, there's nothing you lose by reading through this, but you'll gain a lot of insight to some of the other things that happen. So particularly design patterns and things like MVC. There are a bunch of design patterns out there. There are simple patterns that are used in typical object-oriented contexts, and there are more traditional patterns, that people have been using for quite a while. And for people in theoretical computer science, if you talk to them about a traditional design pattern like factory or something, they will be impressed. They'll be like, wow. So that is there. He also talked about sharding, partitioning in databases. So again, if these are new terminologies, then just try to just look it up, Google it, and at least be comfortable. Well, if there is a large database, why do you need partitioning? How do you partition a database? Where is a database in all of this architecture? Physically speaking, if this is a cloud-enabled service, then what components are where in the cloud? What kind of latency do you expect? And a lot of these performance-related things, I believe, might have been outside the scope of today's discussion. But when you are designing an enterprise-grade application, when you are designing an application that's going to be used by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, if you're designing Uber, Ola, whatever the application is, you have to take into consideration all these things, right? So addressing that when you are asked a system design question definitely impresses the interviewer. Please also focus on the chat panel. A few questions were asked in terms of, how should I approach a system design question? I think Sunita already answered that. So go with, functional requirements first. first, do that, and then do the next steps automatically, in a logical way. Partha also mentioned in his flow, this is how you start. So remember those things. Please go to the chat channel if you haven't. There are a few questions which were answered there. I think there's also a question around, if you are a relatively new graduate, what kind of system design questions to prepare for. Typically, new graduates are not asked detailed questions, but yes, getting to know how, say, Uber works or how Facebook works or something of that sort would definitely help, right, at a high level. Partha also talked about hashing methods. He also talked about caching technologies. He talked about Redis and a few other examples. So if you don't know about what that all are, then of course reading it up. And as Partha mentioned, once you publish it, Partha, just let me know, and I'll be sharing it with the entire team, whoever is on our distribution list. You also talked about security, SSL, TLS, and all that stuff. And of course, in the end, microservices. So folks, do address all these areas, especially if you are kind of new to a certain area. Do refresh on that before going for an interview. Okay, so I will take another just 5 minutes of your time. Typically we end closer to 6 o'clock, although this is supposed to end at 5:30. But today I assure you it will not take more than 5 more minutes. Okay, so Partha, again, thank you for this. This was an awesome session. I hope to see you back again sometime in the near future, and we'll talk maybe in more detail about an area that is close to your heart. And be assured that you'll have very active participants like we have today. Thank you once again. All right.
Thanks, Shiva. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely, Partha. And okay, before we let you go, right, folks, I will be sending out a formal thank you to Partha on LinkedIn. Please go in there, whatever appreciation you have for Partha, please put it on LinkedIn as well, so that the whole world will see that he and Sunita have been very helpful to us today. So thank you, folks. All right. So that being said, typically, when you are preparing for a technical interview, the process involves at least 5 steps, depending on your level of seniority, right? There is a phone screening, a multiple choice quiz, there's a coding exercise, and of course, you go to a technical interview and system design. And now, especially because of COVID and all that stuff, it's getting more difficult. Our success rate, typically for, good candidates, has been hovering around 8%, as you see in the pie chart at the bottom. The funnel that you see in the right is typically what the clients, especially high profile clients, expect in the process, that they are hiring the top 1% of the talent. And no doubt, if you see on this slide, the reason you are all here, and I have to reiterate this again, is in the last 3.5-4 months, 1.9% has been the success rate for interviews that we have had at client sites, okay? That is a ridiculously low number, which basically means that unless you are really prepared, the chances of success are very low, okay? Which also means that for every 50 interviews, you get selected in 1. So go with that expectation. In fact, the first interview you go to, I would suggest don't let it be your ideal company. Go to a place where you think you can go and most likely maybe not get selected, but you learn a lot. So that way then you can focus on the ones that you are more serious about, okay? I also mentioned in the beginning, we are recommending at least 100 hours of preparation. And if you look at the stats here, right here, the middle one, 33%. 33% of hiring managers make a decision to hire someone within the first 90 seconds, within a minute and a half. The way you answer the first question is an indicator of how strong you are, okay? So remember these stats. I'll be sharing this presentation with you as well. Okay, so based on the feedback we get from hiring managers, and there were several of them that I've spoken to in the last 3-4 weeks. Number one is prepare, prepare, prepare. What it means is not just what you do. You should be prepared about the job, the requirements, what they expect you to do as well. Please don't be surprised with any questions that get asked in these interviews, okay? Number one. Number two, you have to be very strong in the fundamentals that include data structures, that include algorithmic approaches, memory management, bunch of things, again, depending on your level of seniority. And then, of course, system design. Do all the research about the company before going there. Please don't ask them basic questions which you could have potentially Googled, right? And number four is very important. Not all people take that approach, but I think Sunita and Partha outlined this, that when you are given a problem, particularly system design questions, ask clarification questions before starting to answer. Ask them about what kind of functionality is expected of the system, right? What is in scope, what is outside scope, and you make your assumptions, make it interactive. So number 5, hiring manager will provide you enough hints. You should take a collaborative approach. You wouldn't want to go there with the assumption that Partha mentioned this multiple times. Don't go there with a rigid framework. Okay, show them that you are adaptive and you are willing to learn. So that kind of humility, that kind of an approach will definitely make your profile even stronger. Okay, so now to Ankita's question. Okay, so there is a great resource written by the ex-Googler Gail McDowell called Cracking the Coding Interview. This book is available for free online. I was able to find this on a blog. I think it's still there. Grab it, download it, and start going through it, because this book will go page by page, chapter by chapter, how you should prepare for such interviews. Okay, and again, I'm not affiliated with the author or the publisher or the book in any way. I just found a free resource. This would have otherwise cost you like $30-40 on Amazon, and you have to wait a few weeks. Maybe it's even more expensive, but it's available online thanks to Ahmad Badawi for free. Okay, so grab it. And Ankita, I think this will answer a lot of your questions, and I think a couple of others, Poonam as well, had these questions. If I'm new to system design, where do I start? If I'm a new graduate, where do I start? If I'm preparing for a company like Apple or Google, where do I go? Versus, now remember this, every company has a different approach to hiring. Okay, Facebook hires a different way. Google hires a completely different way. Google has this concept called lateral thinking. Okay, they are not much interested in your technical knowledge. They are more interested in how you think. So although they will be asking you some syntactical problems, at the end of the day, your approach to lateral thinking is what will make them decide whether or not you are a good fit, right? Because they have to look at organizational fit also. Languages can be learned, okay? As long as you're good in the fundamentals, as long as you're strong in one language, picking up something else is relatively easy. Right? So this book is available, again, like I said, for free. I'll be sharing this with you. Download it, and it goes through step by step. What do you do, a year before the interview? What do you do 1 month before the interview? 1 week, 1 day? What are the kind of use cases to learn? What kind of questions you should ask the hiring manager? Not only that, there is a separate section for each of the more prominent companies. There's a section on Uber, there's a section on Google. So if you're going to those companies, exactly how you should prepare, because Gail actually worked at those companies and she was part of the selection team. So she knows exactly how the things work inside. Remember one thing, she mentions right at the beginning that it is a very unfair process. Okay, she acknowledges that it is not a fair process. What basically means the more informed you are, the more prepared you are, the chances of success is much higher. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. So please revise, please be well prepared. We have a bunch of helpful links here, right from online tutorials to a bunch of stuff, including the Medium article. Once Partha publishes his, I'll share that link with you as well. In addition to that, there are a couple of very famous but relatively young people on YouTube. One is Gaurav Sen, another guy called Tushar Roy. Just go to YouTube and Google, Gaurav Sen system design, and you will get a lot of their system design videos. Barely 25-30 minutes long in some cases, depending on the use case. Some of them are very detailed. These are really good. Educative.io has a great resource called Grokking the Java Coding Interview. Again, that in itself should be good enough. But from what I know, Educative is not a free site. There are certain things that are available for free. They may even have a trial period, but certain content, you may have to pay for it. Again, we are not advertising any of these. We are not associated with any of these, but these are all good resources, including Vaidehi Joshi's blogs on Medium. I think Partha would attest to that as well. There's Lead Code, again, a great site, and again, Hacker Noon, of course. So that being said, I'll wind up now in a minute. I hope you have liked our bootcamp session today. Thank you for joining us. If you are preparing for interviews, you have to put in a lot of effort. Okay, remember 100 hours. Good luck to you. If you need our assistance in any way, please feel free to reach out via email. If you want to be in our mailing list so that you get invited to our next session, which is the following week now, not this Thursday, please let me know via email. So with that being said, thank you very much. Good day and good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.